Move a little bit closer. It's a little bit easier to adjust.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for coming out. My name is Olga George. I am the press secretary for Mayor Gainey and the city of Pittsburgh, and I welcome you to the City County building. Thank you all for coming out this morning so you can learn more about the proposed zoning amendments. And those amendments of housing in Pittsburgh. That's a real. Thank you. Now, to speak on why and how these changes will benefit residents is the Director of City Planning, Dr. Jamil Bey.
Good morning. One of the most critical responsibilities we have in the Department of City Planning is to correct past injustices and dismantle barriers to smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. Our goal is to create a city where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. And that starts with ensuring access to affordable, quality housing. Right now, the odds are stacked against us when it comes to building affordable housing. The demand far exceeds our capacity to deliver, and some of our existing zoning and planning regulations make it challenging to attract the kind of development that provides affordable units close to the city's opportunities, amenities, and public transportation. This is not just a Pittsburgh issue. It's a nationwide challenge. There's a pervasive belief that if we simply encourage market rate housing by removing all for builders and developers, that an abundance of units will eventually drive down prices, making more affordable options available. But let's be clear, this trickle-down approach to housing has never worked. Instead, what we see is that the affordable units are often built far from the city center, disconnected from transportation networks, it does not operate in isolation. It is deeply intertwined with the labor, education, and financial markets, and markets often fail. And when these markets fail, as they often do, they harm people, pricing more and more residents out of homes that they cannot afford. We can change this narrative. We can do better for the residents of the city of Pittsburgh. We must ensure that affordable housing is available within the city, close to the opportunities that make Pittsburgh a vibrant place to live. However, numerous barriers stand in our way, many of which are embedded in zoning and planning rules that date back as far as the 1920s. While some of these regulations may have made sense at that time, our city's needs have drastically evolved. We are no longer attracting tens of thousands of immigrants to work in steel mills. In fact, we face stagnation and population decline for over 7 decades. Today, we're announcing a suite of proposed amendments to our zoning code, which represent an important first step toward removing these outdated barriers. You will hear more details and specifics later, but the primary changes, one, will allow accessory dwelling units to be built citywide. Imagine a small apartment over a detached garage. We propose that we expand inclusionary zoning citywide. This package would offer developers incentives to make space for affordable units in all large-scale development. We will introduce parking reform, thus reducing the need for large parking lots and reducing builders' costs, while encouraging the use and access to less environmentally damaging modes of transportation. Number 4, we're proposing reforms to lot size requirements. Thus making it possible to put more units on lots and infill vacant lots across the city. And the 5th one, we are introducing changes to the transit-oriented development zoning that will increase density near transit access points like the South Hills Junction and along the busway in parts of the west. Now, while these changes alone won't solve the problem, they are crucial in creating the conditions needed to start building new affordable units soon. And this is just the beginning. There's still much more work to do, but with these initial steps, we're moving in the right direction. And together we can make Pittsburgh a city of opportunity for everyone. Thank you.
Well said, Dr. Bay. At this time, I would like to invite some of the people who are doing the work with us, or that there is housing for all. Please come forward. Come on up. Come on up, guys. Don't be shy all the way. Thank you. Besides these wonderful advocates who are working hard to make sure that there is housing for all, I would like to also bring up next a council member who is a definite advocate for the people regarding making sure that there is housing for all. Councilperson Deb Gross.
I want to make a confession before I start. When I first heard about the reforms that Dr. Bay just spoke of on the phone from our deputy mayor, Jake Pollack, I said I would do cartwheels at the press conference, right? That's not going to happen. And I said, well, okay, maybe I have time to practice. I did not have time to practice. So I'm safe to say that I'm extremely excited about these proposed reforms. And here's why. We all know the rent is too damn high. It has been for a while. It has started in some parts of the city a while ago, and now it's expanded to almost every corner of the city that we can find, right? Some people were skeptical that that would ever happen, but that's where we are today. And that's why these reforms are so critically important. I don't think that I could say it better than Dr. Bay said it. We have an outdated barriers to housing in every single corner of our city. But at the same time, we need to be strategic about how we build a city that has half the population that it used to have, right? And so we don't just have the free market building housing where you don't have access to food, you don't have access to childcare, you don't have access to transit, and all of these people standing behind us here today have been telling us this loud and clear. And so I really want to give them credit for giving us the guidance, for the community leadership on how we build a city where you can succeed, right? And so I'm ecstatic about expanding inclusionary zoning, ecstatic about reforming parking reform. Now, let me tell you about parking. I had a project in my district where their budget for every single parking space was $90,000, right? So one apartment, one parking space, 100 apartments, 100 parking spaces, that's $9 million of parking spaces. 200 apartments, 200 parking spaces, that's $18 million of cost added to that project. That project didn't happen, right? If we have reduced parking requirements, we're going to see more apartment construction. Thank you. I've had two constituents that I can think of that had to accommodate their mother-in-law living with them. Both of them wanted to build ADUs, what we're talking about today. Both of them wanted to build a tiny house in their backyard. And neither one of them built those tiny houses. Both of them went through the extraordinary requirements and the time and got petition signatures from their neighbors and had to do a zoning board adjustment hearing and go in front of a public hearing. It's just too hard, right? These are forms of housing that where you live, you might want to build one. You might want to add an apartment to your house. You might want to convert your garage. You might need a tiny house. You might need them for your kids and your grandkids. They need to move back home with you. You might need them for your mother or your mother-in-law. You might need them for yourself. I like to wave around this thing. Thank you, James, from my office. It's the ABCs of ADUs because I have a letter of support from AARP Pennsylvania because they're so excited about accessory dwelling units to make rent more affordable for people who own homes to have rental income, or to be able to age in place in their own communities without 3 flights of steps because they have a little 1-floor apartment in their backyard. So we're excited about these changes, certainly expanding IZ citywide. But what Dr. Bay didn't speak to, which I'm also excited about, was the Planning Commission vote yesterday on our fair housing amendments. And so let me say, there will be lots of time to hear from the public. Council is still going to be discussing these. We will have public hearings. You will have your say. But I want to give thanks to not just Dr. Bay, but Mayor Gainey for taking action on all of these housing reforms. And thank you. Making the space for us to have more transitional housing. Council has been asking and proposing that there be more transitional housing in our system so that people can get off the street, people can get out of congregate shelter, people can get indoors, but still have privacy and autonomy and safety and dignity. And that's what we're looking forward to do. Thank you all. Appreciate the support.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gross. Now, as you've been hearing, this is a collaborative effort, making sure that housing for all is possible. In the trenches with Councilwoman Deb Gross is Councilwoman Barb Warwick.
Hey, everybody. So I am so proud to be here today as Pittsburgh takes yet another monumental step toward tackling the national housing crisis here at home. This is the culmination of so much hard work and collaboration, not just by Mayor Gainey and his team, by Corey Lehman and our incredible zoning administration at City Planning, not just by Councilwoman Gross and her staunch advocacy around housing the unhoused, not just Councilwoman Strasburger and her unwavering commitment to prioritizing people over cars, but also thanks to our community groups, the Pittsburgh Housing Justice Table, Fair Housing Partnership, Pittsburghers for Public Transit, and the folks at Pro Housing Pittsburgh. You guys, they are relentless on the zoning stuff. All right. They are relentless on the zoning stuff and they are right. And also to so many others who I see here today. You all never let up on pushing to make sure that every Pittsburgher has access to quality, affordable housing here in the city. And this stellar package of zoning changes is going to help us do that. So specifically now, I'd like to address one of those changes that has been a focus for my team. That is the reduction of minimum lot sizes and the elimination of minimum lot sizes per unit in multi-unit residential districts zoned for moderate, high, and very high density. It's a mouthful, I know. So what does that mean? So essentially, we have many apartment buildings here in Pittsburgh that you could not rebuild today with the same number of units. the minimum lot size per units requirements wouldn't allow it. So if you tore down a 5,000 square foot 4-unit building, you could only rebuild 2 units. If you tore down a 12-unit building, you might only be able to fit 5 units on the lot. Our current minimum lot size requirements don't reflect the reality of how dense the housing in Pittsburgh already is and how dense we need it to be for our city to grow. I know in my district, in District 5, it is next to impossible to find an affordable place to rent.
That's right.
I did a search this morning on Craigslist for 15207. That's Greenfield, Hazelwood, the 31st Ward. There were fewer than 10 hits, and there was nothing under $1,200 a month. Now, that may sound cheap if you're moving to Pittsburgh from the Bay Area or New York City, but that is not cheap for Pittsburgh, for the people who live here in Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Union Progress reported last year that, quote, removing the per apartment property size requirement for the RMM zoning district could produce about 8,800 new apartments across the city, including 2,100 in Squirrel Hill. Reducing minimum lot size requirements and removing the minimum lot size per unit as recommended by the Housing Needs Assessment will allow developers to build more units for less on a given property. As a whole, this package of zoning changes will make it easier and less expensive to build both large projects and additional living spaces for our kids and our aging parents. It will give us more flexibility in sheltering our unhoused neighbors. It will help make our city more walkable and less car dependent. And it will compel our developers to include affordability in their plans, which they can do without taking a haircut by accessing the ample housing subsidies already available to them through vouchers and other rental assistance programs.
That's right.
So I encourage all my colleagues on City Council to vote for this package. Thank you very much to everyone here. Thank you.
As you have heard, the proposed changes regarding transit-oriented development zoning, accessory dwelling units citywide, inclusionary zoning citywide, parking reform, and minimum lot size reform are all part of the proposed zoning amendments. To talk about how these proposed amendments will impact co-chair of House's table and the director of Lawrenceville United.
Good morning. My name is Dave Bringen, and I'm the executive director of Lawrenceville United, a membership-driven nonprofit organization whose mission is to improve and protect the quality of life for all Lawrenceville residents. I'm also a co-chair of the Pittsburgh Housing Justice Table, coalition of over 100 organizations and individuals who believe that housing is a human right and that everyone should have access to the housing they need. No matter what neighborhood we live in, we all want the same thing, a safe, secure place to call home. Yet across Pittsburgh, housing is increasingly unaffordable to more and more residents. According to the city's latest housing needs assessment, Pittsburgh has a shortage of nearly 9,000 affordable housing units for its lowest income residents. Nearly half of all renters in Pittsburgh are cost burdened, while over 1 out of 4 renters in the city of Pittsburgh pay more than half of their income on housing. This disproportionately affects our Black neighbors, exacerbating existing disparities, deepening our city's segregation, and driving a loss of 10,000 Black residents between 2010 and 2020. In Lawrenceville, displacement has been even more dramatic. Median home sale prices in Lawrenceville tripled in the past decade, placing Lawrenceville's zip code as the second highest in America for housing price appreciation during that time. This has resulted in mass displacement, perversely excluding the very community members who helped lead positive change in our community. Numbers don't do it justice or adequately reflect the full extent of the harm, but in just a recent 5-year time span, Lawrenceville lost half of our Black population, half of our neighbors living in poverty, half of our housing choice voucher households, as well as a 38% loss of kids under 18. When families are pushed out of their community by higher prices, they don't just lose their house, they often lose their schools and their teachers, their primary care physicians, their friend groups, their after-school programs, their grocery stores, the safety of their neighborhoods. We have a severe housing crisis in Pittsburgh, and we need a bold, comprehensive, all-hands-on-deck strategy that meets the scale of this challenge. If we want to create a Pittsburgh for all, we must create housing for all. And that's why we're so excited to see Mayor Gainey and the city introduce this suite of zoning amendments today. While these policies may seem wonky, what they all do, quite simply, is to create housing opportunities so that more of our neighbors can live in the communities they want to. More housing for older adults who want to age in place in their community or stay close to loved ones. More housing for the 1 out of 5 households in Pittsburgh who don't own a vehicle and depend on living close to reliable transit. More housing for people who want to live in walkable, bikeable, accessible neighborhoods. More housing that matches the character and density of historic neighborhoods like Lawrenceville. More housing for low-income families who deserve to raise kids with the same access to opportunities as kids born into wealth. More housing for the essential workers in our neighborhoods that keep our communities running. And more housing for neighbors who lived through the rough times and now see prices going up in their neighborhoods and wonder how new development will benefit people like them. In short, more opportunities to keep Pittsburgh home for all of us. Whether you spend your free time reading the zoning code like me or not, these are common sense goals that reflect the kind of neighborhoods in Pittsburgh we all love already and want to hold on to. I'm particularly excited to see citywide inclusionary zoning included in this package as a policy that was homegrown in Lawrenceville and was born out of a grassroots campaign of everyday neighbors to make sure that as we grow and change as a community, we preserve a diverse neighborhood where people of all incomes can live. Towards this goal, IZ in Lawrenceville has been an amazing success. Don't believe the haters. In just a few years, 4 projects have been entitled across Lawrenceville under inclusionary zoning with broad community support. When they're all done with construction, they will have created over 100 affordable housing choice vouchers. Another 2 eligible private developments are going through the entitlement process right now in Lawrenceville alone. While outside groups have claimed that IZ would slow housing production, there's no evidence to support this. By our count, Lawrenceville saw nearly 20% more units entitled in projects over 20 units in the 5 years since IZ was enacted than the 5 years prior, despite this period's well-known challenges from pandemic disruptions, soaring construction costs, and ballooning interest rates. 100 inclusionary units is not enough to meet our affordable housing needs, but this represents a significant amount of new units for neighbors that would otherwise be priced out of Lawrenceville's market. By any fair reckoning, Lawrenceville's example shows that it's past time to expand it citywide as it was originally modeled and intended. Critics will say that it won't solve the housing crisis by itself, and we couldn't agree more. An ambitious, comprehensive strategy is necessary. These zoning amendments are but one critical part of that strategy, alongside other recent efforts like the Fair Housing Amendments recommended by Planning Commission this week, funding towards right to counsel that was passed the council just yesterday, subsidies, the Affordable Housing Bond and the Housing Opportunity Fund, permitting reform, and a more comprehensive overhaul of the zoning code, not to mention growing our capacity for social housing and strengthening tenant rights. In the meantime, I want to thank Mayor Gainey, City Planning, and members of City Council for leading on these important zoning amendments today. And we look forward to learning more about this legislation and engaging our neighbors around them. and how they help promote housing opportunities for all.
Thank you, Dave Bringen. Now, it's really important for Pittsburgh to lower housing costs and provide opportunities for more households to live in more neighborhoods across the city. And there's one person who truly believes in that. That's the mayor of the great city of Pittsburgh, Mayor Ed Gainey.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How you doing? Before I begin, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to everybody here. This is an issue that we've worked on for the last 15 years. Before I was a state representative, before I ever became mayor, these were issues that are in the streets, the neighborhoods that we have worked on for a number of years. And I just want to say that this is what happens when you never give up the fight. I want to say that a lot of times we have talked about being able to create a city for all and change things. And a lot of times people didn't believe it because they institutionalized it yesterday. But it takes the group behind me that we should really give credit to for always saying that they believe in a better tomorrow and not getting stuck in the status quo yesterday. And for that, I'd like for you to give them a round of applause. There's nothing more important than having a place to call home. There's nothing more important. That's why I say our tagline in this city should be Pittsburgh is home. And we should be building a better city of homes for the diverse population we have. Nothing is more vital to our ability to feel safe and welcome in our communities. And it is critical to always feel that we create an environment where people can thrive. We are in the midst of an affordable housing crisis, a crisis that has been coming for decades. And we cannot kick the can down the road for the next generation to deal with. That's what got us here in the first place. My administration believes that it is the best to address all of our challenges head on. And we've done that as an administration. To my administration, I want to say thank you. This is why last year we took a bold action to work in partnership with the great URA and issue the first ever affordable housing bond in Pittsburgh's history, which will lead to 1,000 new and preserved units of affordable housing over the next 3 years. That's major. That's major. Now listen to this one. That is why we have made generational investments in affordable home ownership, housing preservation, and community land trust, and brought home an unprecedented number of LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit deals over the past 2 cycles. And why are we here today? To speak about transformational changes to our zoning code that will ensure we continue to move closer to the promise of making this city a city for all. In order for us to develop a city that reflects the diversity of our residents, it is necessary to have a diversified supply of housing available in our city. These reforms provide residents with the unique opportunity to invest in their properties by creating additional space and units that the current zoning code restricts. They encourage investments tied to new housing developments, aiming to improve things like our streetscape, to allow for more walkability, bikeability, and increased use of public transportation. And yes, these reforms do ask our development partners to help us in providing affordable housing units. However, we are also proposing to allow for height bonuses, increased density, and the elimination of parking minimums. So we're not asking something and not giving something, because we know it takes all of us to increase the affordability in our city. We don't view these reforms as an easy fix, we don't. For the issues we are facing for this city is major. But again, they believed, and now you believe. Thank you to them again. We are working hard to meet the challenges we face. And I know that there's a whole lot of work ahead of us. We're happy about that. But I feel this is just another step forward in keeping our promise to create a city for all. We can't do any of this alone. You hear me say that all the time. We can't do this alone. That's the reality. Look around. But together we can get it done. And we're proving that today. I want to take a moment to thank our community partners and advocates, which I've done. But I want to give a special shout out to our elected officials, Councilwoman Gross and Warwick and Strasburg, for working to advocate and advance many of the legislation that you will see today. I'd like to thank our Department of City Planning and all the experts that helped them through the way. We said we wanted to create a city for all, and we knew that housing was important. And we're doing what's necessary to build a city where everybody can call home. We're not just talking about it. We're not talking about what we're going to do. We're talking about what we're doing right now. We're talking about what's been working on for over 15 years. We're talking about the manifestation of people that want this city to be the best, safest, most welcoming, and thriving city in America. So today is a referendum on the work that we put forward to demonstrate that we're serious about having a city for all. And you know the tagline, let's go get it.
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, I know the media has some questions. Questions? Yes? Is the question regarding will it allow boarding houses?
Yeah.
My name is Corey Lehman, zoning administrator for the city of. Boarding houses are really considered under the zoning code multi-suite residential. Multi-suite residential is already permitted in certain districts in the code. This package of reforms doesn't make a change to that.
But if they like a common kitchen, right? Like one of the in the zoning that you can put in, right? Or that you're trying to get in, it says that they have if you have up to 10 people in the house, if they have common facility, right? So if people share a bathroom, if people share kitchen, but I say I rent for my kitchen. Then it's not allowed like that for renting it for renting it like that. Did I charge my store?
So you're referring to the Fair Housing Code amendments that were before the Planning Commission. They were just recommended to City Council. There's still public process on that package of zoning amendments. And I think you're pulling together a couple of different things, the change of the definition from family, which requires currently for us to regulate by family bloodlines, which frankly not interested in doing, changes that to household. And then you're also talking about personal care homes of up to 10 individuals. Personal care homes are already allowed in the city. And also talking about a group of unrelated individuals that are disabled, protected under which is part of our definition of family currently in the zoning code. All of those are fundamentally fair housing protected families. We're not changing in that code or in this package, multi-suite residential, which is a type of boarding house or a type of, basically a suite where individuals live together around a common, we have suites around a larger like scale, like a dormitory. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Julia from the Trib. You're asking about the timing of the package? I'm sorry, come up a little bit closer, Julia.
Sure. So not going to speak directly to the lawsuit as that's ongoing litigation, but we felt that this was the necessary time to introduce this suite of reforms because we see that the need is so critical and that it is only growing, right? The housing needs assessment update came out in 2022. It proposed many of these reforms to this effect. The zoning team has been working since then on preparing some of these amendments, and there is no too soon in solving this problem. So as the legislation was ready for release, that's when we decided to introduce it so that we can bring this vitally needed support to the individuals in our city that are facing displacement or housing burden as a result of escalating housing costs. This is really the second phase of major effort in this area. You heard the mayor mention the historic investments in affordable housing financing that the city has made in the past few years. That's only addressing one portion of the problem. And while we've seen real success and real improvements as a result of those financing mechanisms, the next step is changing our zoning code to ensure that we can maximize the value that those dollars bring by having the zoning code that can support more housing, more diverse types of housing, and more affordable housing.
Question, yes, Beth? Main Street parking regarding reform?
So the parking provisions of this legislation only affect the parking that is required to be built as part of housing developments. It's not, it doesn't change zoning rules around other types of off-street parking or on-street parking. Its primary aim, right, is to eliminate what are outdated requirements for the number of parking spots that are required, often underutilized in housing developments, to ensure that those developments aren't so costly that they have to charge exorbitant rents. So I think that the regulation of parking in business districts for commercial use is an issue that's separately addressed in the code, and on a case-by-case basis, proposals for structured parking or other types of parking to support commercial districts will be considered. It's not affected by this legislation.
All right, another question from Anne.
Look at the permitting process, so that we already have.
Yeah, I think the short answer to that, Ian, is, we've done some pretty significant changes to the permit process already in the way that it works. The launch of the new building development application is kind of proof of that, right? Where